Good evening, everyone. Again, welcome to our fifth in a series of What Does It Take to Be a Disciple? It's a study in Catholic social teachings. We had 4 previous to this one, 2 introductory sessions, and then a session on interfaith and social teachings. We don't have a monopoly on that. And last week, we had the Archdiocesan Director of the Social Ministries Office. And tonight, we have a parish experience, a parish that really takes Catholic social teaching seriously. So the pastor, Father Steve Gosoma, and Pat Ferrone, who's in charge of the social ministries of that parish, are going to have a conversation with us. And it should be interesting. So it's all yours.
All right. Well, it's this prayer is kind of appropriate because it's a Thomas Merton prayer, but I'll just say the first line and then I'll go into the rest of it. But I have no idea where I'm going. So obviously I was a little confused trying to get here. But this is a prayer of abandonment, which I think is really fitting for the work that we do with peace and justice work. You know, it's not always clear what our next move will be or what we should do, you know. So I take heart, and we take heart from Thomas Merton. We are all familiar with Thomas Merton, so he's a good one. He's a guy I can recite it by myself, but I have a card here in case I flub up. But it's my Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I cannot see the road ahead of me. I do not know for certain where it will end, nor do I know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to love as Christ loves does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will do nothing apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are always with me and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. So that's a bit of a consolation to start with, and we can build on that and tell you some of our story here at St. Susanna's. It will be ultimately it will be a show and tell because I think the visuals will help too. So Steve, maybe you want to say a few words. And
sure. And this was an interesting talk to prepare for, because it really makes you do a little bit of soul searching, but going down your own memory lane and family tree as to how this all started. I would invite you for a moment just to try to visualize the church in which you grew up in. Just take 1 second and think of the church building, which, well, like your first parish, the first place which you remember is your faith community, and just get a sense of that for a moment. And I suspect, looking at these faces here, that most of us weren't all that recent when we first went to church. We were probably a couple of decades ago, to say the least. But as everyone is here, just the physical structure of the building. It's what? How did it speak to you? It's what did it say to you? It's where was it oriented?
Are you asking us?
Well, I'll start off by sharing. I grew up at St. Columbkille's in Brighton, and it's a Gothic church. It's been there 150 years now, I believe, maybe a little bit more. I think more than that. It's a beautiful building, but there was no doubt when you walked inside that you left the world outside that. It was stained glass windows, and you had all these wonderful pictures and images of eons ago. There was nothing in the building that pointed to the day-to-day life that people were living in. I suspect in those days that one of the values of going to church was to kind of escape all of that and to kind of step into a different world where you would kind of view where you were going, but not where you had been. I always had I would say I had a vocation to the priesthood for most of my life, from the time I was a child, we had a wonderful school. The Sisters of St. Joseph were wonderful there. But my vocation really didn't begin to solidify until I think I knew why I wanted to be a priest after Vatican II. And I'll talk more about that later, but that really seemed to make all the difference in the world to me in terms of going forward. And one of the things about Vatican II was connecting the world to the gospel. But I'll stop there and just to kind of get a sense of what your early church image was like. And then we're going to get into kind of how we kind of emerged to where we are now.
I'll say one thing. I grew up in in Hartford, Connecticut, and in a little mission church. And it was, I'll never forget the Father Ferrone and Father Mullen. And it was a very small church, but it was very intimate. As far as symbols and all, I loved the votive candles, and I used to take my dolls up there and light all the candles until Father Farrell said from the altar, with the child who is lighting all the candles, please not do that anymore. But I learned service. I was collecting money for the poor. I was doing all kind of painting the church, and so the church itself was a symbol of family, really, maybe being small and being so close. We were there all the time. And so I think that kind of started me on my journey. So, but maybe some of you would like to speak.
I'll jump in. I grew up in Rutland, Vermont, and Catholic school, Christ the King, CKS, and the church right across the street. The church was made of marble because Vermont was known for its marble industry. Inside, however, it was very dark unless you had the sun shining through those gorgeous stained glass windows. You really couldn't tell too much about them. But the church, as I grew up, was a safe place. It was a place where I could go in and I could talk to Jesus all on my own. I do remember, strangely enough, I really was fascinated by the light of the candle, saying that Jesus was here. And I remember writing a little poem, and I did not win the contest, and I still don't know why. In the church, the red light glows, shining on sinners here below. Why not be as good as he who paid for our iniquity? Isn't that good?
Oh,
Yes.
hey, you get an award.
Okay, so we're talking about probably 5th grade, and I was the loser. I cherished that because it meant so much to me. The church was a place where Jesus is here. And as a family, I mean, we were a family that prayed the rosary every night around my mom and dad's bed. So I cherish many family excursions to the church, walking with my mom, walking with my dad, walking with my siblings. And we would be at novenas, we would be at benediction. You had to stop playing wherever you were and get to church for benediction at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And our liturgy, we had different groups of altar servers. We had the ones in the black cassocks who actually helped the priest. We had what we call the red boys, and they were in red cassocks, and they got to hold almost like candles within torch windows. So that gave a great deal of pomp and circumstance. And then we had the little itsy bitsy kids who might fall asleep during midnight mass, but they were the little white boys. And so it was like this whole group of people with a great deal of dignity and love. But I don't think we ever talked to one another in church as we do now in our parishes. We come in, we say, oh, hi, how are you? Are you feeling better? None of that. It was purely liturgy. It was lovely. I outgrew that, though.
Yeah, our masses were all in Latin. I remember.
Oh, yes.
I was in
Yeah.
all, and we only had one class at St. Colin because we had the cassock and surplices on. And whoever could memorize the Latin words to the Mass and recite them the quickest would be the first to start serving. So you know who got that award. The priest actually had a stopwatch. We had no idea what we were saying. As long as we said the right words, that's all that was important.
Yeah.
It was just interesting how it was a wonderful place, but looking back, I got the sense now that it was more about keeping us contained as opposed to sending us out, you know? It's interesting because the word mass means to be sent, and we never got that impression when we were in church. We got it was a safe place for people like us in our neighborhood and our schools, a wonderful community. And to venture outside was very dangerous. My mom was in the school in her day. She was a generation before me, and she wasn't allowed. They didn't have a Girl Scouts troop there, so she had to go to the Congregational church. And when she did that, because she went into the building once a week, she had to confess it on Saturday at confession, because that would be considered sinful
Wow.
to enter the building of somebody else. So not only was it kind of geared to keeping us together and safe, but there was kind of a distrust of the world, or even it's evil out there, you know? So
Yes.
that was kind of the original impulse, you know? And I don't remember our church being as involved with helping the poor as Pat's was. I'm not to say that they weren't, but when I was a youngster, it wasn't in my recollection. Now, they ran a huge school, a parish school, which was a huge endeavor. We had 150 kids in each grade at the time. So it was a pretty big school, and that was taking a lot of effort. But it wasn't until the seminary, and I forget who introduced to me the concept, but it was in a social justice course, that social justice after Vatican II was a constitutive part of the gospel. It wasn't like a nice thing you could do if you had the time to join St. Vincent de Paul or to join some little thing on the side. It was kind of an intrinsic part of what it means to follow the gospel. And so that's when the vocation started to take a different kind of a shape and turn, I think, you know, that we are connected to this world in some way, and that the gospel is connected to the world. And I think in the 70s and 80s, they began to be like liturgical teams. And some of those that were in certain, we didn't have one at our home parish until after I was gone. But my experience of those at first, as good as they were kind of centered within the parish. They had to do with good liturgy, but not too much to do with the world, you know?
Right.
And it wasn't until probably the late 80s that the idea that like a liturgical team and a social justice team really should be one and the same. If they're both doing their work, there's a connection there. If the Eucharist is the center of if that's the center of our life, it's not one or the other. It really needs to connect both. And so that was, for me, the way the kind of peace and justice became like not a nice thing on the side, but it was a way of following the gospel, a way of worshiping, a way of connecting the church to the world and people's lives and hopes to the world as well. You know? If that makes any sense. I don't know if that.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
yeah, we might even want to transition to you know how we're finding it different, how we're doing it a little differently at St. Susanna's
Sure.
in terms of the symbols and the attention that we've brought to issues. You know, liturgy is very important, but what does it lead us to do in this world? So we have a you know, kind of a series of photos that will, and we can stop now and then and just explain a little bit more about what these things represent, but we'll go through a few. So we have this first one, and you know, do you want to talk to that one, or we're in a conversational mode, so we may interrupt one another or add to one another's comments, but this, well, I'll say this was something that we had come up with. You'll see a picture of our creche, which pointed out the mass shootings that had been taking place in our country, and no one does it better than we do in terms of gun possession and killings of one another and mass shootings. So there was a series, probably in 2020, this was 2021, right? 2020, when it just became so apparent that we had to respond in some way, having addressed it in our creche one year, our first year, as a matter of fact. So this was an effort of tracking mass shootings across the country for a full year. So this is what we did. We ran out of flags at some point, but every week or sometimes.
But we added more. We got an extra 1,000 to keep it going for the.
Yes, that's right. The Congregational Church gave us 1,000 and we used those up and we ordered more. So what you see here are representations of mass shootings that have taken place all over our country. And every week we would change the tally. So people would drive by and be able to see what was going on. It was a quiet but persistent witness to our, one of the manifestations of our violence, our very violent society.
And it grew over the weeks, and it'd be interesting. Cars would often stop. You'd be out working in the grounds and cars would stop. For the most part, very supportive, occasionally somebody who would take issue with it. And the people who would take issue with it would be more in the fact of, well, the church shouldn't get involved in that stuff. And I'm thinking like, really? But it would make good conversations, And it took a little bit of effort to kind of keep the flags going and the grass cut. And we had to take them all up and cut it and put them all back to kind of keep it looking. But when you look at our church, usually on the outside, there's something on the outside that bespeaks a connection to the world and that either challenges the world in some place. I think when we had started this, it was at a Pax Christi meeting, and it was in 2000, I think 16 or 15 or 16. And it was after one of the mass shootings. And it seemed to be that every other week you couldn't do anything or say anything except prayers and thoughts and prayers. It was never the time for action or to enact laws or to change our ways. It was always thoughts and prayers. And we thought we had to do something to keep the conversation going. And it was just before Christmas, and it was the first time that we thought, that sometimes you have to speak words in a way that people would otherwise miss them. And you can give a class or a homily. We have a lot of adult faith formation classes, and we've had this topic a number of times in our adult ed classes, but it just seemed as if it wasn't going anywhere. So we thought we put it out into our nativity one year, and the response was amazing. We got a lot of response. It kind of went halfway around the world, and it was just it really caused a conversation to take place. Pat even had conversations with some of the store owners here in Dedham at like Dick's Sporting Goods and a couple of places in Natick. And months later, they actually stopped selling some of their assault rifles. I have no idea if it was because of her interaction with them or the national conversation, but the point is, when you kind of keep the conversation going, it does have effects beyond what you might imagine at the beginning, So there.
And we often, just one more thing, we often had articles in the Dedham Times about these topical issues. So our reach was as large as we could make it at the time.
This is a small sign that was in front of the rectory. Someone had given me this. We used to have our mass out in the parking lot during the pandemic outside, but somebody had brought this site, and this sign was just out near where we say mass. And it seems like the most innocuous thing. It's just a simple little thing. It's like, how could you be against any of those things? Well, there's a policeman's son who lives at the end of the street. And when he would drive through our back parking lot, just seeing the Black Lives Matter would make him irate. He would go totally ballistic, and he thought it was disrespectful of the police. But again, its words have consequences, and sometimes you kind of have to put your words out there. And I think he just saw that through a totally different light. But the fact that words, that images, that like visuals can touch people in a way that, like, he's never gonna, he wouldn't hear a homily in a church, or he wouldn't come to a faith formation class, but he would see that, on the outside, and it got a conversation started. And many of those folks have kind of come around a bit. I don't think any of those have resulted in somebody, like total alienation. But you keep the conversation going respectfully, and it's interesting what percolates on the other side of that. And that's the fun, that's our fun entrance now. Pat, you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, well, this is based on the treaty for the prohibition for for nuclear weapons, and it was the interesting thing about that whole effort. The TPNW is what it's called, is that it was a grounds up approach to getting people to sign on. So they went to I don't remember some of the details of it, but what they did was they started with the nations, the smallest nations, the people who are generally much more affected by things or will be affected by things, and they have no responsibility for any of this. They're not part of the nuclear nation club. They're innocent in a certain sense. So it generated a groundswell. So when they reached 50 nations who ratified this treaty, this was that they were able to say nuclear weapons are illegal. Of course, they're illegal for those nations who participated, but it is a wake-up call. And the idea is to delegitimize the idea that nuclear weapons are something we should have or will serve as deterrence. And we have that from, of course, from Pope Francis and many others. And we'll mention later one thing that's very important right now about this effort. So this is kind of stapled up there, and people drive by and see it, and no one has objected to it. So it's we're feeling that this is a very legitimate kind of issue to speak about.
And as Rocco could, I'm sure, affirm, that you can preach all you want, and but like our homilies are like 10, 15 minutes, whatever. I think Pope Francis asked that they be about 10 minutes or less. I'm not sure if Rocco follows that or if I always follow that. But there's not a lot that you can cover in 15 minutes. So because of that, for the last maybe 18 years or so, we've had adult ed classes, and we have opportunities on most Monday evenings. We have one going on right now, actually. It's for people to come and to listen to topics that affect faith in the world. And this is one topic from a couple of years ago. And our speaker on this night was Sister Helen Prégine, and she was talking on capital punishment. And she gave a wonderful talk. We've had so many speakers like her come in on so many different topics. In the second half of our classes are usually questions and answers. So it's not just it's not just presenting for an hour. We have an opportunity for good dialogue. And most of our presenters are professors from the local Boston colleges, but we've had authors, physicians, historians, it's biblical scholars. We've had 5 folks who have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. We had Walter Robinson from the Boston Globe on the Spotlight, for example. We've had Hindus, Muslims, imams, every conceivable faith to show how we're all connected. And so often of these classes had resulted, after so many of these initially, we had people saying, what can we do next? So our next step was to put a library in behind the stage. You can't see it here, but it's in the back room there. And a lot of the people who have come to speak, it's their books are there. And at any given time, there's maybe 15, 20 books that are taken out. It's a very small library, but it has a lot of current topics on most peace and justice issues, on scripture issues, on interfaith issues. And those follow-ups often lead to action. And this was a vigil that was a couple of years later, but it was in front of the church when Lisa Montgomery on the eve that she was put to death. And Pat might want to speak a little about her specifics.
Yeah, well, what I'd say, there was toward the end of the last president's time as president, there was an acceleration in executions, as you might remember. I think there were 13 that were done between July or August, and into January before President Biden could be inaugurated. So one of the things that that we did, or I guess I'd say I did this particular part of it, was to read about each of the people who, there were 5 that were going to be executed in 1 week. So I read about them, and then I created, from what I had learned about their biographies, I created what would you call it?
Not about biography.
Well,
Biography.
I gave them words. I used their stories to create their presence with us. So Lisa Montgomery got to tell her story of abuse and at the hands of her mother, and all of the things that led up to her having a psychotic break and creating the horrific crime that she was guilty of. But so we made them human. We made them human, and it was a very beautiful ceremony that evening. So it was just making things real, making the people real, and then praying about it and then acting on it. For instance, there is a woman on Texas death row. I think she has just gotten a stay of execution, who's accused of killing her 2-year-old child, and the Innocence Project has taken her on. So she would be one that we would have called on. We have called on, and we are doing what we can to stop that execution. So this was a response to real situations.
And then we did it was the Christmas Eve truce of 1914, when the soldiers spontaneously kind of lay down their arms and celebrated Christmas across the trenches. The German side with the French and British side. It was like a miracle of 1914. And someone had put that to music, and we did a presentation of that at Christmas, which was very well received. And it was just an opportunity again in church to singing Christmas carols that are so familiar to us, but to realize that we are all one, and that the madness of war kind of would lead us to a different direction of thinking, that we're on opposite sides of humanity almost. But it just kind of was a moment that kind of brought lots of people together. That we sponsored a walk once after a particular a presenter. We had a march against human trafficking to raise awareness of that, and one of the stops was at the local courthouse, and that was just kind of one of the shots from that day from people who had taken part in that. We put a peace chapel in many years ago. It was an unused section of the church that had originally been a baptistry. And when I got here in 2001, it was a storage room. So we made it into a peace chapel. Here you see it on a Holy Thursday evening, but there's 8 peacemakers around. It's kind of a cloud of witnesses. And it includes people like St. Francis and Mother Teresa, but also people like Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. So it's just a nice way of kind, and that place where the altar, it's where the tulips are. Every month we would have kind of a different theme or a different focus, so people could come in and kind of consider what was going on. There'd be information there, there'd be petitions there, there'd be places to write to, there'd be but all sorts of informational like material for people to come in and consider. It's what our role in the world is. And likewise, when you enter the church, every Lent, we always have a cross there, and Easter. Pat will talk a little bit about this one. So this was, I think, this was Yemen.
Yeah, this was Yemen, and this was, you probably, and I'm not remembering what year this was either, but we knew of the death of 34 young children who were going on their way to school, all carrying their blue backpacks, and all of them were killed. And so we commemorated them by gathering their names, and as you can see, putting the backpacks, the backpack there. So this was this happened, as I guess I said, in Yemen, but we've had a hand in that. The United States has had a hand in it by selling weapons to United Arab Emirates. So this was a way of remembering these children. So we've done different themes, and I think we'll show you a few more. We can't really tell which ones. This was a
The plastics.
a fast on plastic. Another connection is to face some of the environmental issues and to make connections, because everything is connected. War is definitely connected with the environment. So this is, we all gave up plastic bags, or we paid attention to it and drew attention to it throughout the Lenten season.
And it was the beginning too. It was at first, it was we gave up plastic bags, and we gave out the Saint Susanna, but like the paper bags for people to use, the cloth bags. But that was kind of the beginning of that whole journey. And then Laudato, I think this was when Laudato Si first came out. And then at Easter time, we have a kind of a different focus with the earth and how beautiful it is, and how it's kind of our job to kind of restore it and to show good stewardship of it. So that's just some of the Easter things over the years. But Easter time, we try to highlight the good works that are being done, how we can connect to those. It's this year. It's Kathy Kelly had given a talk to the Association of U.S. Priests a couple of months ago. And there was one lady in one of her slides that was carrying two pictures of the works of mercy and the works of war. And it just struck me how we're really involved in one or the other. That we're really not innocent of either one. We seem to, even our non-action puts us into one of them, you know? And it just kind of shows you how you really have to make a choice in life. And if you're walking in the way of the gospel, hopefully it's the works of mercy that kind of overtake your life, or that you can join in with. But as we move out of the works of war. This is from the House of Peace in Ipswich. It's one of the places that our confirmation students would go to every year for a service project. They take in refugee children from other nations for the last 30 years. It's John and Carrie have adopted children, I think initially from Vietnam. It's John was a part of the Vietnam, he was a soldier in the Vietnam War, and he really had a change of heart because of that experience. And he wanted to somehow offer healing after the harm that we caused. So they adopted 11 children, he and his wife. And I think they've adopted over 300 since then, from Iraq, Afghanistan, from Palestine, from all of the places that are torn by war. They offer the medical assistance in the Boston hospital. Some of them stay here for a long time. Others go back after they get some kind of healing. Just a remarkable couple who kind of, and we've had a couple of parish council meetings there and a couple of service projects there with adults and kids. It's a special place. It's kind of, you meet people who kind of walk in the way of peace. And I've heard people from the parish council, we've had a retreat there before, just saying that just walking in the door and meeting these folks just kind of gave them a whole pause for their life and made them, and some kids would go up to like do a service project day, but go back with their families later on to help out with things on their own. Just kind of, it just opens door and plants seeds as to, I mean, we hear things in the gospel that sound like they come from a different planet, but here's people who are doing it day in and day out. And it's just kind of it's just a way of life for them. And it's life-giving. It's joy producing for them. It's not a work or a labor. It's really a joy. I think one of the days that in my time here at St. Susanna's that really hit me, this was right after the election of Donald Trump. And I think the world was kind of stunned at that time, or at least folk around here were. And they had a rally the next weekend in Boston. It was just to people coming out. No one really knew what they were doing, but they just wanted their voice to be heard and to kind of say that there was an alternative to this way. And we didn't announce it at church. I took the train in that afternoon, and on the way at the train station, I met about a dozen people from the parish who were just on their own decided to join in. And it was a wonderful thing to see people just spontaneously step out of the church. It's because of their faith perspective, and decide to really to kind of take a stand and to have their voice be heard in the world.
So this was the very first creche scene that we worked on to express, to bring Jesus, to show that Jesus was connected to what was going on. And these were 14 placards that we made and hung in terms of the mass shootings that had happened over a relatively brief period of time, and indicating the numbers. So this was sort of started a series of interpretations of Jesus in the world, what kind of world Jesus is being born into each year. And they've really become a focal point for people drive up and spend some time there, almost in prayer, thinking about what is happening. And so we'll have a series. Maybe we can sort of just show that these were the
making of the signs.
The making of the signs, right?
And when we put that up, we had no, we did not have any. That's another result of the mass shootings. We had no idea. We did not send out anything to any of the press. I think we sent something to the Dedham Times. That's the only one we called. And within 2 days, that story got picked up. It was on national news, international news. It was just bizarre. But the word got out, the conversation was continued, and I don't think we were ready for that. The next year, we did this with the title "Peace on Earth?" ? And again, everyone says "Peace on Earth" at Christmas time, and we put Jesus in a cage and the wise men behind a wall, and to say that went ballistic like within a day it was on The View, it was on Saturday Night Live, it was national news in Africa, in Israel, in China, in Germany, in France, South America, in Saskatchewan. It went completely, it started the conversation. We had to shut our phones off for 2 days because, it's once Sean Hannity got a hold of it, I think he sent his minions in and they just kind of attacked. They were just horrible. It was, most of the comments were good. The ones from certain areas were certainly, they were like almost given a script to say, but we got so many calls from people across the country who said that they wish that their church would do that some had left the church years ago because they never talked about anything that was real going on in the world. And this seemed to give a lot of people hope. And of course, this was at the time we had just welcomed our own first refugee family. Oh, sorry. And they happened to, and we thought at the time we would get somebody from Syria because when Trump came in, he shut the spigot off to most of those people. And we were on a waiting list. And as it ended up, we got a family who was originally from Burundi. We had no idea where they were going to be from. And they spent 3 years in the Congo and then 13 years in a refugee center in Uganda before being cleared to have a home in this country. And this was their first day in the United States. It was their first morning in the United States. They had to stay here at the rectory for 2 weeks because their house wasn't ready. We only had 2 weeks to get a house. So we had to kind of do a lot of running around to find a place. And this was in conjunction with 3 other parishes in Dedham, with 2 other parishes, with Allen Congregational Church and St. Paul's Episcopal worked together on this. And they were, and again, it's reaching out, it's making connections. And this was their first, breakfast in the US. And this is the picture of the next day. Sometimes you think resurrection happens after Good Friday. Doesn't always happen that way. This is the next day. This is Abu, is the person in blue on the right. And he had sickle cell and he had an attack shortly after this. And the next day was in the ICU out at Mass Medical Center in Worcester for about 3 or 4 days. We had no idea that he had that when he was coming. He and his sister both suffer from that. They've both been in and out of the hospital a number of times over the years.
And they've been with us. They've been with us 3.5 years, and they're kind of the loves of our life in many ways. They attend Mass. They're incorporated into the community. They're great friends, and it was a wonderful experience. And it joined together the Congregational Church, the Episcopal Church. People, we think that we Catholics were told never to enter Protestant churches when we were young. Well, one of our very close friends from the Congregational Church was always told by her mother to stay away from those Catholics. So we're all good friends, and we've worked on other things too. And the connection continues because we have another refugee family from Afghanistan that we are settling. So the work expands and the connections expand, and we're making great friends for the future.
And it's funny because going back to the opening idea about the church that we had when we were younger. If I had to go to confession for all the times I went into a Congregational church or a Unitarian church now or Episcopalian church, I'd be in confession all day long, because there's like no distinction between, I mean, we're really one family, not just with the family itself, but with the members of the other congregations. I mean, we really, I mean, I think we feel kinship with each other. There's really no difference what sign is over the door. In some ways, it's remarkable how that happens.
So this was quite beautiful if you saw this in day, because this is to address the issue of climate change, and underneath there were all of the things that have been flooded as a result of climate change in the rising waters. So this is a very dramatic. You can see the wise men who are, caught in the water, the rising water. So it was, again, it's just showing our connection with the real world, the real issues that we have to address, and it's never one thing, So it calls us to respond. I mean, you may have a particular direction that you'll go in, but after doing this work, this peace and justice work with Pax Christi and the Greater Church, that we're responsible for so much, and we do what we can, right? And these are things that we've done. So this is a creation care corner that we put together, and some of these signs, we need to update some of these things, but they were indications of what was going on in different parts of the world. And besides the plastic, fast from plastic, the next effort that came along was a voluntary carbon tax witness, whereby people could commit to giving a certain amount of money, however they wanted to, monthly or weekly, whatever they wanted to do. And so far, we've collected, like $7,000, and we've given away $500 grants to five different groups that are working at the grassroots level on water projects or
Solar farms in Guatemala and Africa and Haiti and indigenous places across this country. And it highlights too the positive things which people are doing, so that this started before COVID, and then it's carried on tremendously on its own without really much effort. But our original idea was to highlight one effort each month, and whatever we got that month was into that project. But the money comes in so sporadically that we said we'll give 500 to each group, but we try to highlight the work of each group, because that kind of motivates people to see what they're doing. So we had a class recently in our adult ed class where we had 3 people from the parish speak about their work to combat climate change. People from the pews. He's a member of Engineers Without Borders, and he works in Guatemala. His was almost a vocational story. He started with the indigenous peoples of this country, but like working on their lands and bringing like solar and water to them. And now he's doing it in Guatemala. A second man, he teaches at Tufts. He's an engineer. He teaches engineering, but he invented a material to replace asphalt, and it uses recycled rubber, plastics, and vinyl, but for roadways, which is kind of remarkable. He was written up in Parade magazine a couple of years ago. And the third guy works at Boston City Hall, And I think most people knew that he worked there, and they figured, well, he's probably some kind of a politician or collecting their taxes or whatnot. But he's planning for climate change for the city, specifically the rising waters of Boston Harbor. And the planning for that is amazing, how they're looking, and it's happening now. It's not something that might happen in 30 years from now. They're already changing the building codes in the city so that, for example, that, like, I think starting next year, you can't build any building that's more than 10 families that has fossil fuels. You can't have any more, but like furnaces in the basement level, they have to be up above, because the water is already, I mean, it's coming in right now. And so they're kind of planning for this in the future. So we kind of, again, they kind of raised the idea that climate change is not something which might happen if you want to believe it. The city of Boston has been investing in this for eons, and they're getting ready for the next 50 to 100 years where it will be different. Our energy sources will be different. Our buildings are being different. They're already being zoned to be different. They have no way, there's no way to keep the waters out. So now the question is, what do they do? It's where do they go from here? You know?
Rocco, it's 5 of 8. Can we go just a little bit longer than?
A bit, sure. We started late, so sure. We can go
Okay,
5 minutes
so-
late.
So we'll move along. And this was you went, but this was the,
Yeah, this was after the second election, when there was a lot of consternation about, the people were worrying about what would happen when the inauguration would come. And it was also the time when COVID hit. So our theme that year was Peace, Us Together with Love. And we made the US specifically look like the US as opposed to both us and the US. Peace, Us Together with Love. It's because people then were fighting about, it's people then were fighting over wearing masks and not wearing masks. And it was all that, it was that crazy time. So we just kind of highlighted some of the issues, hunger, racism, climate, refugees, war. I don't think, well, you have to lift up your box to see it over there, but like war, execution, things like that were happening at the time. Oh, why won't that go down? Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, and we brought the earth ball into church for a while. It was right up in the altar. It looks smaller there. It's about almost 5 feet in diameter, but for about a year, it was right behind the altar to kind of highlight the care that we need to give the earth. And this was this past Christmas. It's Whose Child Is This? Some of the pictures might be familiar. The little girl being lifted out after the Afghan evacuation on the second to last one on the top. The mother and the child in the middle from, I think that was from Ethiopia. Is that from Ethiopia?
yeah, Ethiopian mother and child. That was, Stan Grossfeld from the Boston Globe took that photo.
And we took the theme of Whose Child Is This? It's a song that's sung at Christmas time, and we all think it's Jesus. And it's like, if we can't see whose child is in these pictures, if the answer isn't the same, we haven't done our work, as long as we get different answers. That's another group at the House of Peace. That's just an adult group who went up for a day to plant their garden for them. Scott Schaefer Duffy is a frequent visitor here. He sells breads at his churches in Worcester to support their work at the St. Francis and Teresa Catholic Worker House in Worcester. And he's spoken here a couple of times. He's a remarkable guy. And at the time he makes his living by the bread offerings. And he didn't have room for us because he did 50 churches in Worcester. But once they started closing them, he had a couple of openings. So we asked if he could come out, and we said, sure. So he used to come once a year. Now he comes twice a year. And he comes one Sunday a year or 2 Sundays a year, and he offers his homemade breads, and people are able to support his work. And he's gotten a lot of us on his publication list, and we do service projects there. And it's it's a two-way street. I think it's people are really taken by his work, and their eyes are open to the needs of the world. And his kind of witness is remarkable. He likes the forum here.
Why don't we, we'll show maybe clips of the, of the original.
Okay.
This was a reading of Thomas Merton's original Child Bomb. And we're not going to obviously show you the whole thing, but we'll just show you an excerpt. We have a couple of
Good morning and welcome.
Yeah. Couple little video clips from two different events that we put on, and you want to do Blanche or what were you?
Motor Oil Company, the Sumitomo Chemical Company, and most of the inhabitants. At this time, some atomic scientists protested again, warning that the use of the bomb in war would tend to make the United States unpopular. But the president's committee was by now fully convinced that the bomb had to be used. Its use would arouse the attention of the Japanese military class and give them food for thought.
So that was just a portion of the original child bomb, which is an excellent thing to think about when we remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So there's one. What? Okay, you're gonna.
Yeah.
And we're going to another. Oh, was this? This was a part of another video.
5 occasions since the early
Oh, no,
1980s
this is the right
when
one.
either Moscow.
Yeah, I don't know how we got
Sorry.
that one. Sorry.
Sorry, we have to go back to the TPNW. Okay, and
here it
we're
is.
gonna get, you have
For
the
some reason. I think
time on that one?
Yeah. What was it 14:43? 14,
Let's see.
14:45?
14:45. This
But
just
it's not showing, it's showing him. I don't know why. No,
14:45.
but I know, but it's not showing. It's showing.
Oh,
I think it skipped to another one.
oh,
The
okay.
Russians have threatened to
Sorry,
pay
All
for
right.
it to you.
You know, we'll maybe skip that. It was one of our parishioners who actually read the testimony of one of the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we have every
And
year
those are
we
on our
do.
website too. They can see
And,
those.
and if you go to our website, you'll be able to see the full extent of those video YouTube videos that we put together. So this was last year, or was it the 75th anniversary? Last year when we put together a structure of peace cranes and helium balloons on the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And at that time we were having outdoor masses during COVID. So that was quite dramatic and a lot of fun to put together. And then this was kind of the final picture here.
The two more, I think.
Yeah, all right. And get I think all the churches in town held up the sign, there's no room for hate. And then there are a few of us peacemakers in the making, and in front of the earth ball. So anyhow, you can see that in many ways we're an activist, a parish, but we do try to bring prayer and spirituality and great homilies on the part of Steve. And I've even been able to take over the podium on occasion to talk about things that we're involved in. And so it's a very egalitarian approach maybe to peace and justice. It's a place of great freedom to explore issues, and you're all welcome here anytime you want to come. We often have our Pax Christi retreats here, Pax Christi assemblies in the fall, where we bring in speakers. And you're welcome to any of our programs. You can zoom in on the Monday night programs where we always have a great series of presentations on all kinds of subjects, not just peace and justice, but other things that are of interest to us. So do you have any questions or comments you'd want to make, and then we can wind it up? And with but Steve has it. Yes.
I was wondering kind of two things. One, these ideas are extremely creative. Do you have Like, are these ideas coming from lots of different people, or how do you get these ideas? That's question number one. And question number two is, do you get sometimes pushback from people on some of these?
It's the pushback. I can honestly say we haven't had pushback from the parish. Every now and then there's somebody who might have a conversation about something, but it's not really, it's a life-giving one. It's not really it's with the stable, we got a lot of pushback from certain segments of society, but not from here. I can say that,
Okay.
not from here.
Good.
I mean, after the one that with Jesus in the cage, my sister called up that morning. I was sound asleep, and I didn't even know it had gotten out. And it was on the talk radio that morning. And she says, "Would you go? I'm going to come over and set Jesus free." And so we had a conversation. And my sister, I'm thinking, like, my God. But for the most part, it leads to good conversation.
Conversation. Great.
We nicknamed there used to be a statue of Saint Susanna on the front of the church. In 1984, she fell off. She came right through this thing. She came right through the sunroof over the front door during mass. They could feel that it felt like an earthquake, and no one got hurt. Thankfully, she didn't hit anybody. She would have killed somebody. And so we put a shrine to her in the front of the church, and we were doing some I don't know what she was the patron saint of, and there was nothing that she seemed to claim. So because of her life story, we gave her the title the patron saint of honest conversations. Because her whole family was killed because she wouldn't marry the emperor. But they had a conversation about that, and the emperor was one of her uncles was the Pope, although in those days they didn't have that official title. It was 200 AD. But she knew that the emperor was killing her brothers and sisters in the faith, so she wouldn't marry him. And she knew that her refusal to do that would mean the death not only of her but of her family. But they all decided that was worthwhile. So that must have been some honest conversation that they had.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of our things is honest conversations, you know?
Yeah, and I just, I'm losing my train of thought, but I did want to mention that the Pax Christi group initiates a lot of things, but you know, we've spread out. So there are interactions among many people who have ideas that we work with, you know, and so you can see the inside of our church is filled with symbols, but they're not the symbols that we might have been used to in other years. We have a banner up there. We didn't have a picture of that, of a quote from John Paul II, you know, do not follow those who train you in the way of war. So we're quite overt in a certain sense, but really on the mark. When you go back and you read the material, you read the Pope's statements, or you read, you know, any of the authentic peacemakers, you know, there are so many of them out there that give us alternative views, and all kinds of things are happening within the Catholic Church. The Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, working on nuclear issues, just wonderful, wonderful things. So I assume you're all part of Pax Christi, which is a fantastic thing. And we're growing, I think. And I think nonviolence is finally hitting the airwaves, and especially the nonviolence of Jesus. And I will just mention one more thing before the prayer, because this is so terribly important. And I'm sure Father Rocco has spoken about this. And this is the recent pastoral by Archbishop John Wester of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this is the booklet that has been put out by, it's the exact thing that you find online, but beautifully put together with good paper and all, living in the light of Christ's peace. So we will be having a session on that on May 2nd, and Father Rocco, Father Steve and myself will be leading just discussion groups. But the thing that we've done with this is Pax Christi, Massachusetts, ordered enough copies to send one to each of the bishops and auxiliary bishops in Massachusetts under the name of Pax Christi. I've written a piece that will accompany it, and Father Rocco and I will be signing the piece that will go to them. to try to get them on board, to start, as Archbishop Wester says, start the conversation. So this is what we have tried to do, is to start conversations. So this is an important, if there's nothing more, we will end with a prayer.
And after the nativity scene with the child with Jesus in the cage, it was getting a little hot and heavy for a while. And I remember I was home one night. It was my day off, and my brother-in-law said that if you're over the target, if you're catching a lot of shrapnel, you must be over the target. So sometimes you can view that as not necessarily a bad thing, and that kind of changed your mindset. But it changed my mindset just a bit, but that's not a reason to back off. Sometimes if you're following the gospel, it's certainly it's a hard thing to do, but it's and this comes from it's attributed to Archbishop Oscar Romero, but he is not the author of this. The author of this is Bishop Ken Utner. I spent a sabbatical with him out in California once by chance. We just happened to both be the same place at the same time, and we became very friendly, and he just impressed me as someone who was doing this. But when I first started the call to action, this was the opening prayer for the call to action, and I've kept it ever since. It was in Detroit, the first call to action. It's funny how that group now it's interesting how that group is now banned from some church, from some diocese. There's some bishops that would actually excommunicate somebody who belongs to call to action, which is, I can't even comment on that. It's just so bizarre. But this was the prayer that was written for that call to action. I think it's a good way. It's a good reflection. It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is the Lord's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom of God always lies beyond us. No statement says all that should be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives include everything. This is what we are all about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that provides effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders. We are ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future that is not our own.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
And as Phil Berrigan once said, I think it was Dan or Phil, he said, if you're doing peace and justice work, you better look good on wood.
That's right.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you.
Oh my gosh. Ah,
Thank
you're doing
you.
such
Thank
wonderful
you.
work.
Well, come by sometime. Yeah, be happy to, Father Rocco, you can bring everybody over
All
sometime.
right.
Okay, we'd love
Field
to.
trip.
You want to have lunch out in the Resurrection Garden someday? It's beautiful this time of year. Just pop out there and
Yeah.
stop by for a cup of tea, and we'd love to chat.
Sure. Any
Thank
other
you.
comments
Wonderful.
from anyone? If
The
not,
Holy
then,
Spirit is very much alive
isn't it?
in your church.
Yes.
And we must remember in each of us as well. And you have made it sound so simple and yet so deeply profound and very difficult to actually get it off the ground.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. That's remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
it's-
writing frantically and I can't read my own writing, so I'm in trouble.
Just look at the video later or something, but you know what?
Sure.
We struggle, nothing is easy, and it's nice to pull everything together, but it's step by step by step and work by work by work. If you write something, when I write something, I agonize over every sentence practically, and it takes me a long time, as Father Rocco knows. And but it's worth it. It's worth the effort you put in, and sometimes you have more energy than others. And we're going to all hit the wall at some point in our lives, but we're all adding to the wholeness, let's say the wholeness and the holiness maybe of creating God's kingdom is
Right.
what we say here, not kingdom. So we're all part of one another, and we're doing the work together.
And thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the invitation. Just putting this together, we didn't know where to begin. We were looking through like old pictures and we were kind of going down memory lane, and and when we took pictures before, it was just, we have some, we don't have others. This is kind of like one segment of, it's just kind of a little, but it just kind of gives you a taste and a flavor of our own past, so it was fun.
Amazing.
It's fun seeing how all of the dots connect in preparing this. So
And you can see we get along, so that helps.
Yeah, that helps.
It's a great example of
That helps.
collaboration.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh,
Well, listen,
well,
let me-
thank you.
Let me just add something before we close. Pat was talking about the upcoming conversation that we're going to be having on Monday. But if you get the recent Pax Christi, Massachusetts newsletter, there are 2 articles that I wrote about Archbishop Wester's pastoral. So that's there in the, it's on our website. I have actually hard copies here in the back of the shrine that people can pick up. But nationally, Pax Christi USA is going to have 3 talking circles on the pastoral. So if you go on to the Pax Christi USA website, you'll see the link. So it's going to be 3 Tuesdays, I think, in May, that they're going to have a series of talking issues on the pastoral. So, and again, it's the See, Judge, Act process. And it's very, very good. It's a wonderful example of that. So.
And the one other thing that I really must mention is the collaborative in Newton, Shoal,
Yes.
SHOL.org, shoalnewton.org. On May 15th, Dr. Ira Helfand, who is a Nobel Peace Prize winner for his work against nuclear weapons with the Physicians Against Nuclear Weapons, and a special visit by Archbishop Wester, who's going to give a 10-minute presentation. So that's going to be by Zoom. So go to their website if you're interested. It's a Sunday evening. And what did I say? May 15th.
yeah.
May 15th. So
Would you spell that out again, please? Spell.
SHOL Newton.org. Shoal. Yeah, it's at Sacred Heart and Our Lady Help of Christians came together as a collaborative. So join in there. That would be a good thing to do too, if you have the time.
And you can find that link is also on our website too. It's on our website in Bulletin, so you can register there too.
And I'll probably put all those links on the Facebook page. When I make this video into a YouTube, I'll put those right on the YouTube, on the comments below it. So again, thank you very much. And
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring.
Oh, good.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Wow.
yeah.
Nice spending the time with you. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So
Bye.
next week,
Thank
we'll
you
have
for
Father
feeding our
Carl.
minds and our souls. Thank you.
Next week, we'll have Father Carl rounded up again using Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti, using that particular section on dialogue with Islam. So that's what we'll conclude the series with next week, Monday. So we'll see you then.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you. Father Rocco?
Yes.